Hey guys, welcome back to A World Joe Traveled. Today I'm going to talk you guys through what you need to know on your first trip to Europe. So this is going to cover everything from which credit card to take, do you need cash, to language issues, to where to stay, as well as transportation and tourist sites, all the things that you need to know. So be sure to watch till the end. All right, so before we get started, if you find our information useful, please subscribe. It helps us out here quite a bit. All right, so one of the first things that you need to know whenever you're traveling to a foreign country is what kind of currency do they use and what is the exchange rate. So you can just Google that and it will tell you basically what the dollar is compared to whatever the currency is that you're traveling to. So if you're going to Europe, it's generally against the euro, the Swiss franc, or if you're going to the UK, against the pound. Another thing that I get asked a lot about currency is, do you take cash with you? What I would recommend doing is not exchanging any of your cash in the airport or at a exchange location that you come across. What I would do is just take your debit card, make sure you tell your bank that you're going to be traveling, go to an ATM and exchange maybe $100 at a time. I wouldn't take out a ton of cash, but just enough to carry with you, because not all restaurants in Europe or Mexico or other locations take credit cards. So be sure you have some cash with you or the ability to get some cash pretty quickly. The last thing to really note about currency in foreign countries is the foreign transaction fees. You can get credit cards that will waive foreign transaction fees, but every time you swipe your card, there's going to be a small fee associated with it. So just be aware of those fees. Another question that I get asked quite a bit is there a language barrier? Typically what I have found is that language isn't an issue. It's really a non-issue. English is taught in many of the schools, so a lot of the kids that are growing up now know English very well. Additionally, whenever you do have to interact with somebody that would potentially speak another foreign language, there's usually the option to have English. So for example, if you are eating at a restaurant, that would be an interaction that you would have probably most commonly. What I have found is that there's always a menu in English as well, so you know exactly what you're ordering. So you either flip it over and you find it, or you request to have the English version of the menu. All right, so next up we're going to cover transportation. And for this section, I'm really going to be focusing on Europe because there's a lot of different modes of transportation there that are quite different from the US if you're living in the Midwest or in a larger state where everything is spread out. So in Europe, there's multiple modes of transportation. So you've got trains, and trains, you've got regional trains, you've got local trains, you've got high-speed trains, you've got trains that go inter-country or go around to multiple countries. And then trains have their own intricacies because you've got tickets, you've got reservations, you've got all of those different components to trains. And then outside of that, you have other options too. So you've got cars, you can rent a car, you could get a taxi. Some European countries also have the option of Ubering. So I did that last year in Scotland, and it was super convenient. There's also the option, so I'm looking at my notes, you've got buses and then you also have taxis. So there's multiple modes of transportation. In Europe, the culture is so different. It's very rare that somebody would actually have a car. So they have all these other modes of transportation that are really easy to use and really easy to navigate. All right, so let's dig into trains a little bit more. There are quite a few nuances to the train systems in Europe. They're different in each country. So a lot of them have their local trains, and then they'll have regional trains, and then there's those trains that travel in between countries. So you just need to make sure that you're getting off on the right stops and that sort of thing. But let's talk about actually navigating the train system. So first of all, it sounds really easy and really straightforward, but there are some complexities to it. So if you're needing a ticket for the trains, you can book those ahead of time. They're often a lot more expensive if you book ahead of time. You can also book them at a ticket counter, and they now have kiosks where you can purchase them from a kiosk. The kiosks can be a little bit confusing and they don't always work, so I would recommend just going to a counter and buying them there. Another thing too is if you buy them in advance, it gives you the option to reserve seats. This isn't typical for European culture. They are used to just getting on trains and off trains, while Americans are really used to reserving seats and then understanding exactly where they're going to sit. So if you get on a train and you reserve seats and there's people in your spot, just know that that's not their culture and that's not what they're used to. They'll typically move for you, or you'll just go and find somewhere else to sit. So in my opinion, it's not worth it to reserve seats because often they're going to be taken up anyways. The last thing about trains, and just something that I have noticed over the years, is that if you're traveling on trains with a lot of luggage, it can be super cumbersome. So some of the trains you walk directly onto, and some of the trains you have to walk up multiple steps. So if you're carrying really heavy luggage, that can be tough on your shoulders. So if you're somebody that has shoulder issues and you're going to be carrying luggage around with you, just note that you're going to potentially have to climb up a bunch of stairs. The other thing about luggage too is that there are designated spots on the trains to put your luggage, and those can often be filled up. The other spot is above your seat, and you're going to have to be lifting luggage above your seat. It's not typical to have the luggage in front of you and have your feet on it, because the areas there are just too small. So just some things to note if you're going to be traveling via train with quite a bit of luggage or just 1 or 2 suitcases. Before I get started on the next section, if you find this information useful, please subscribe and tell me what you think in the comments below. All right, so next we're going to talk through where to stay. So if you're traveling somewhere and you're not sure which location to stay at or which part of the city to stay in or anything like that, what I always recommend doing, and what I do myself, is I stay really close to a hub of transportation. So typically in Europe, that's a massive train station. And so what this allows you to do is, typically whenever you land and then you get on a train and you have your luggage with you, it's really easy to just get off or out of the train station and then walk your luggage to your hotel or to your Airbnb or wherever you've decided to stay. And if you're staying close to a main hub or a big train station and you want to see more of the country or more of the city, it's really easy to just wake up and get on a train instead of getting up and then figuring out which train you need to go to. If you're staying next to the hub, that's well connected. All right, next we're going to talk through plugins. So this one, if you can see here, looks different on the back, but the front is US specific. So if you are traveling really anywhere out of the US, I think actually the North America, everywhere in North America has the same plugins. But if you're traveling to Europe or Asia or Africa or anywhere else, you're going to need to get a specific plugin for that country. Some of them come all together, and so you have the option to have a UK specific one as well as a European specific one into one little bundle. And you can just get these on Amazon. Super easy to get to. They're not very expensive, but you're going to need multiple of these with everything that we now plug in. All right, one major, very important thing that you want to make sure works whenever you're traveling internationally is your phone. We rely so much on these days that we really can't do a lot without them. So one time I went to Paris and I decided that I would just get on whatever Wi-Fi I could get on over there, and I didn't add an international plan, and I got lost in Paris with no phone. And that's scary, so I don't want that to happen to you. So what I would recommend doing is getting an international plan on your phone. These are pretty cheap nowadays. So Verizon, which is the carrier that I use, it's $10 a day for an international plan. So that's not going to break the bank. AT&T is also $10 a day, and T-Mobile, you have to call and add that to your phone, but I'm not sure how much it costs to do. The other thing is that depending on your carrier, if you add the international plan, it will always be there. And it will only activate or charge you if you use it. One other thing that's important to know is if you're traveling internationally, you may need to find out if you need shots to go to that location or medication. And when I say medication, I mean like malaria pills. Some countries that you go to, you're going to need those medications so that you don't get sick while you're there. So I've traveled to Nicaragua and also to Africa, and I had to take medication the whole time I was there just so that I wouldn't get sick. So just be sure that you look those up just in case. And when you're traveling, don't forget to take your medication with you. This is prescribed medication. Always bring that with you. But if you forget Tylenol, ibuprofen, any of those over-the-counter type drugs, you can purchase those from a pharmacy in really anywhere in Europe or wherever you're traveling to. So a lot of those countries don't have like a Walgreens or a Walmart like we're used to in the States, but they have pharmacies on every corner. And the pharmacies are really like their version of Walgreens, and they have really everything in there that you're going to need, but a lot of it is not in our language. It's going to be in the language of that country. So you might have to do some Google Translate on those. All right, let's talk restaurants. So restaurants in European countries are much different than they are in the US. So a couple of things that are different about them is that they have water. They will have the option to have water with gas or without gas. With gas is bubbly water, it's carbonated. So if you don't like carbonated water, then just say that you would like flat water. That took some getting used to for me when I started traveling. The other thing is that in the US, we are used to being rushed through a restaurant, and that is not the culture in Europe. They will not talk to you at all unless you flag them over, but they will not ask if you want your check. You have to ask for it. So it's not rude. If you're done eating, it's okay to flag over the waiter and say, hey, I'm ready to go. Can I have my check? That's completely fine. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, if you're eating at a restaurant and you can't read what the menu says, either flip it over, there's typically an English version on the back, or request that, and they will be more than happy to bring it to you. All right, lastly, we're going to talk through tourist sites. So when I'm thinking of tourist sites, I'm thinking of these big chapels that were built hundreds and thousands of years ago, as well as like the Colosseum and those types of major monuments that you're going to want to see whenever you're traveling. What I would highly recommend that you do is book your tickets ahead of time. This is going to save you time waiting in lines, and some of the lines are so long that you wouldn't even get to go inside, maybe even that day. So I'd always say book online, have the tickets with you or a picture on your phone, and then you can get right in, but that is going to save you a ton of time. The other thing that I would note too about tourist sites is just know kind of what the customs are around those. So for example, in Milan, you can't go into that big cathedral there if you don't have your shoulders covered. So they make you actually put something on over you. So they're going to have those nuances all over the world. So just make note of what those are and do some research ahead of time. That's all I've got for today. I hope you guys find this useful. Please subscribe and let me know what you think in the comments.